Hello and welcome to the launch of the 2021-2022 VCU-Marquette Challenge. My name is Ashley DeJaco, and I'm one of the challenge coordinators from Marquette University. Thank you so much for being here tonight. We'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Feel free to list your school in the comments for a shout out. I'm sure that everyone must have a lot going on, maybe with midterms or clinical, so we're going to get started right away with some introductions. As I said, my name is Ashley DeJaco. I, along with Hannah Howell and Jessica Strupp, are students from Marquette University and are this year's coordinators for the VCU Marquette Challenge. Joining me tonight is Maya King, representing this year's co-host school, Virginia Commonwealth University.
Hi everyone, I'm Maya King and I'm representing VCU. First, we are going to hear a few words from Dr. Paul Rocker, the president of the Foundation for Physical Therapy Research.
Thank you, Maya. Hi, I'm Paul Rocker, president of the Foundation for Physical Therapy Research, and I would like to thank all of you for joining us tonight to learn more about the foundation and our student-led fundraiser, the Marquette Challenge. But first, I'd like you to please join me in thanking the VCU Marquette Challenge title sponsor, HIPSO CNA, for their generous support for both the challenge and the event this evening. The foundation's mission is to fund research and develop researchers to optimize movement and health. Today, there are many journals and publishing research in all fields and specialties of the profession. However, back in 1979, when the foundation was established, this was not the case. It's really hard to imagine, but just 4 decades ago, there were really only a handful of physical therapist researchers. Fortunately, the founders of the foundation knew that evidence was needed to keep the profession growing and moving forward. Today, the foundation awards scholarships, fellowships, and research grants to the most promising researchers. We're sowing the seeds for research by investing in new investigators at a pivotal point in their career path. Now, since 1979, the foundation has helped kickstart the careers of more than 640 researchers through more than $20 million in funding. And because our peer review process helps better prepare these researchers for future funding applications, our researchers have gone on to secure more than $845 million in follow-on funding. Students like all of you here with us tonight have made a major contribution to physical therapy research. In fact, since 1989, PT and PTA students have raised more than $4.5 million for research. And that's just remarkable. We could not carry out our mission without you. And again, thank you for being here tonight and listening about the Marquette Challenge and what you can do to help the Foundation for Physical Therapy Research. Now I'll turn it back over to Maya for the rest of tonight's events.
Thank you, Dr. Rocker. Tonight we are going to hear from a recent past recipient of a scholarship named in honor of the Marquette Challenge. But first, we would like to introduce the challenge and the organization it supports. The Marquette Challenge is a grassroots, student-led fundraising effort to advance the mission of the Foundation for Physical Therapy Research. Each year, hundreds of physical therapy and physical therapy assistant students, with the support of program directors, faculty, and community, hold events across the United States to raise money for the Foundation for Physical Therapy Research. When students at your schools participate in the challenge at all levels, they make an investment that strengthens their future profession. Every single donation, big or small, makes a difference. Now I'm going to pass it over to Hannah to introduce our guest speaker for tonight.
Thank you, Maya. I'm so excited to introduce our speaker, Dr. Julia Mazzarella. Dr. Mazzarella is a physical therapist and PhD candidate from The Ohio State University. She was awarded this year's first ever combined PODS Nifty Award for her research entitled Hippotherapy for Children with Cerebral Palsy. Julia was also the recipient of the VCU Marquette Challenge PODS 2 Award in 2020 and the PODS 1 Award in 2019. Welcome, Dr. Mazzarella.
Thank you. I'm really honored to be here tonight and tell everyone a little bit about myself and my research. So, got a little slideshow for everyone. And I want to start out again just by saying thank you so much to the foundation and to all of the students who participate in the Marquette Challenge. You make all of this research that I'm doing possible. And for lots of other students out there as well, and I really appreciate that. So I'm going to start out just telling you about my background and my path to research. So I'm going to go way back and tell you that I've been riding horses my entire life, and this has been a big passion for me. And this led me in high school to volunteer with a therapeutic riding center in my town. And that was really my first introduction to physical therapy. So the center was run by a physical therapy clinic, and I really enjoyed that experience, and it got me thinking about physical therapy as a career. Following that, I went to Skidmore College for my undergrad, and I actually started out as a business major, believe it or not, and was very excited to never take another science class again. However, after about a year of that, I was feeling pretty understimulated and decided it was time to change my major. So I decided, looking back on my experience at the Therapeutic Riding Center, that maybe I wanted to pursue physical therapy. And so I decided to start taking the prerequisites. And through that process, I found myself in a neuroscience major. And as part of the neuroscience major, I had to take a statistics class. And my statistics professor pulled me aside at some point and said, "Hey, have you ever thought about research? Like, I think you would be really good at this." And I said, "No, I really haven't, but, I could." So the next semester, I took a research credit and got involved with one of the labs in the neuroscience department doing research in visual perception. And this ultimately led to an honors thesis in visual perception of depth of drawn three-dimensional objects with specular highlights. So very far from physical therapy. But this experience led me to apply for a Fulbright grant to get more experience in research. And so I was fortunate enough to receive that, and I went to Germany for a year and continued with this research in visual perception. And through that experience, I found that I really enjoyed doing research. However, I was really interested in doing research in a field where I could work more closely with the people that I was trying to help with the research that I was doing, and ultimately have more human interaction in general. And so that kind of brought me back to my interest in physical therapy, and I decided to pursue dual degree programs for the Doctor of Physical Therapy and PhD combined. And I was really interested in going back to this initial passion of mine of horses and using horses in physical therapy. And so this led me to Ohio State. I came here in 2015, and I'm very excited to share that I am currently carrying out a pilot study in physical therapy in the equine environment for children with cerebral palsy and autism spectrum disorder. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about my PhD research as well. All of my PhD research has been funded in part by the Foundation for Physical Therapy Research. So again, thank you very much. So the first project that I did for my PhD was looking at upper extremity biomechanics in infants. So these infants were 8 weeks of age. We had 14 participate, and they were grouped into 3 different diagnostic categories. So the first was typical development. The next was infants with perinatal stroke. And then the third was infants with perinatal stroke who later went on to receive a diagnosis of cerebral palsy. The variables that we measured using 3D motion capture were speed of the hand movement, straightness of the hand movement, which is the total distance that the hand travels over the straight line distance of the movement length, so from start to end of the movement, and a smaller ratio represents a straighter movement. And then we also looked at movements per minute. What we found is that we were able to detect differences between the 3 diagnostic categories using these variables. We then went on to look at these same infants longitudinally over 20 weeks. And so we had 2 different conditions. The first you can see in this video here is bilateral, where the infants could reach for the toy with both hands. And then the next, which you'll see in the video in a moment, was constraint, where a researcher was holding one of the infant's arms down so they could only reach for the toy with the free hand. The variables that we looked at for this longitudinal study were the same 3 from the initial study. So speed of the hand, straightness of the hand path, and movements per minute. But because we were also capturing these infants during the age of reach onset, we also looked at number of reaches per minute. And ultimately, we observed trends that indicated differences between groups and also with constraint versus the bilateral condition. And particularly, we found that in all diagnostic groups, the infants were reaching more and moving more in the constraint condition compared to bilateral. So after that, I went on to look at upper extremity biomechanics, but in older children, and specifically to describe the coordination and timing of functional reach and to establish an objective measurement of functional reach performance. So we had 71 children participate in this study, and they all had typical development, and they were between the ages of 7 to 10. And we used the reach and grasp cycle to look at the functional reaching task. So this cycle was originally developed by Butler et al., and it involves 4 phases. So the first is the hand reaching towards the object. And then the next is the object coming to the mouth. The third is bringing the object back to the table. And then last, returning the hands to their start position. We had the children perform this for 3 different functional tasks. The first was a unilateral or one-handed reach for a cup. The next was a unilateral or one-handed reach for a cracker. And the last was a bilateral or two-handed reach for a ball. The variables that we looked at were the speed of the hand movement, the straightness of the hand path, and then the smoothness of the hand movement. So this is represented by number of velocity peaks, with fewer velocity peaks indicating a smoother movement. And what we found was that there were significant effects of task, phase, and task by phase interactions for speed and straightness of the hand movement, as well as significant effects for the dominant versus non-dominant hand for straightness of the movement. Last, I'd like to tell you about the current study that I'm carrying out, which is a pilot randomized controlled trial of physical therapy in the equine environment. The purpose of this was to determine the feasibility of this type of study using an intervention that targets upper extremity function in children with cerebral palsy and or autism spectrum disorder. So we are aiming to recruit 16 children total. As of right now, we have 11 enrolled between the ages of 6 to 17 years old and with a diagnosis of cerebral palsy or autism spectrum disorder with a motor impairment in one or both upper extremities. The children are completing a 4-week intervention. It's 1 hour per day, 4 days a week, for a total of 16 hours of treatment. And we're using a waitlist control design with pre and post assessments. So that means that the children who are in the control group complete an initial assessment and then a 4-week control period where they're just continuing with their usual activities. And then they come back for their baseline assessment and complete the 4 weeks of the intervention and then have their follow-up assessment. And the children in the treatment group come for their baseline assessment and have 4 weeks of treatment and then follow-up assessment. So for the intervention for this study, the children do about 20 minutes of grooming and tacking of the horse. So this involves brushing the horse, cleaning out their hooves, and helping put on the saddle and the bridle and then take them off after riding. They also do 20 minutes of mounted activities. So one of which you're seeing in this image here. They learn riding skills such as holding the reins and using those to control the horse. They also do a lot of upper extremity activities such as reaching and throwing and catching. And as you can see in this image, this child is opening up the mailbox and she's going to toss the beanbag inside. And then lastly, we do 20 minutes of unmounted activities. And these include barn care and horse care activities. So things like sweeping the aisles, cleaning stalls, feeding horses, filling water buckets. And I'm showing an example in this video here of a child who is putting alfalfa pellets into a feed tub and he's going to add water to it to feed it to the horse.
Ooh, can you set that down on the ground? Can you lift this up for me? So we can get a scoop. Can you get a scoop and put it in? Yeah, go ahead, put it in there. Oh, she'll be so happy. Do you want to get one more scoop? Put it in. Whoa, okay. You ready to get it wet so she can eat it? We'll do some water in a bucket, okay? So, oh, put the scoop back in, sorry. Can you help me close this lid? Yeah, 2 hands, I love it. All right, let's go take it to the hose.
So lastly, I'd like to just go through the outcome measures that we're using for the assessments for this study. So we wanted to span multiple levels of the International Classification of Functioning model. So for body structure and function and activity, we're using the gross motor function measure, as well as the reaching biomechanics measure that I showed you from the last study. We are also measuring participation through parent and child report outcome measures. So the parent report is the participation and environment measure for children and youth. And the child report measure is the child assessment of participation and enjoyment / preferences of activities for children. And then lastly, we're measuring engagement and enjoyment of the therapy. So for enjoyment, we're using the Enjoy scale, which is a 25-item Likert type rating scale of enjoyment of an activity. And then we're using the prime measures of engagement, so the observational and the service provider measure. So thank you again so much for listening and hearing about my research. Thank you so much for participating in the Marquette Challenge. And thank you to the Foundation for Physical Therapy Research for supporting me.
Thank you, Julia. We are now going to open up for questions. So if anyone has any questions for Julia, please place them in the chat or the comments and we'll read them aloud. I'll start. I have a question for you. How much experience do these people have before kind of like getting on a horse? Like, do they usually come in with like past history of riding or not really?
For the participants, most of them have little to no prior experience. So one of our eligibility requirements is that they haven't been in a regular riding program for the last 6 months. But most of them either participated when they were really little for a little bit or not at all. So sometimes they come in for their first day of treatment and it's the first time that they're like, you know, up close to a horse, never mind sitting on one.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, we have a question from the foundation staff. Do you have any goals related to follow on funding for your research?
Yeah, so in terms of the current pilot study, you know, it's a feasibility study to see if we could do this as a larger randomized controlled trial. So the goal is definitely to apply for some larger funding sources moving forward. We're considering potentially in the future doing like a multi-site trial if we are able to have a second site for it, just to be able to have more participants that way.
Nice. We have another question. How hard is it for you to leave the lab, university, or to get a place with horses? Like, how hard has it been to find like a place to actually do their research?
Yeah, so it's not necessarily the easiest. When I came to OSU, I really had my heart set on doing this study or something like this. And so I started searching early for a site, and I connected with Dreams on Horseback, which is a local therapeutic riding center. And I've volunteered with them since I started in 2015 in the physical therapy program, and expressed to them pretty early on my interest in doing something like this in the future. And they've been very supportive of OSU research in the past. So it just worked out to be a really great relationship, and I think hopefully mutually beneficial.
Nice. We do have a question from Mary Wilson. And do you have any students assisting in your research?
Yes, I do. That's one of the parts that I've really been enjoying about it. We have several occupational therapy and physical therapy students from OSU that have been volunteering with the study. So it takes a lot of hands to do physical therapy in the equine environment, as you might imagine. We need people to lead the horse. We need sidewalkers to keep the riders safe. And with the barn activities as well, it takes several hands, not just for safety, but to do the activities that we're doing. So I typically have about 5 to 6 people with me every day to make this possible. And the majority of them are PT and OT students.
Awesome. Love to hear students getting involved. What made you focus on autism and CP for your study?
Yeah, so cerebral palsy, it was kind of the diagnosis of focus for me throughout my PhD research so far. So that one sort of just made sense for me. And previous research in hippotherapy has shown that it can be effective for children with cerebral palsy, but not many studies have really looked at upper extremity impacts, and most of them are focused on lower extremity. So my past research, we have done a lot of reaching biomechanics and things focused on the upper extremities. So it was sort of a natural extension from that. And then for autism, I did a lot of training through leadership and education and neurodevelopmental disabilities, if anyone's familiar with that, or the LEND program. And so I've done a lot of work with children with autism in the past, and it's a diagnosis that I am passionate about doing research on as well. And there's also a lot of studies out there showing that being in the equine environment, not necessarily with physical therapy, but other types of therapies can be beneficial for children with autism. So we decided to do both since it's a pilot feasibility study and kind of see what we found.
Awesome. I have 2 more questions for you, and then we'll kind of switch gears. Do you have any advice for DPT students thinking about research?
Yes, I would say give it a try because I mean, as I said in my presentation, I hadn't given research a single thought until my professor said, "Hey, you should do this." You don't know until you try it. So I think, it doesn't hurt to do like a 1-credit research rotation if that's an opportunity that's available at your university, and just see what you think.
Awesome. Okay, last question. We heard that OSU is having their annual Theraball on November 5th to raise funds for the VCU-Marquette Challenge. Are you going to be in attendance?
I feel like somebody put you up to that question. Yes, I plan to be there.
Oh, perfect. We're going to hand it back to Ashley, who's going to do a couple more wrap-up things before we're kind of finishing off tonight. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was an honor.
Dr. Mazzarella, thank you again so much for providing such a great example of how the foundation supports our profession. It's amazing to see how our hard work fundraising for the challenge translates to clinically relevant research. Look what we can do when we collaborate and raise funds together. It's as simple as a bake sale, virtual or in-person run, gala, silent auction, apparel sale, and so many others. That's the power of working together for a common goal. Now that we're starting to come together again, it's time for us to step up and take the lead to encourage fundraising for the foundation. As student leaders, we are the driving force to inspire our classmates. We have a duty to ourselves and our profession to keep the challenge going. So as we enter into another year, here are a few more reminders to help with your fundraising. First, stay connected. We're all in this together. Social media is one of our greatest resources to spread the word. Make sure to tag @Challenge4PT, and we will share your events on the Challenge and Foundation social media channels. The VCU-Marquette Challenge Toolkit has been updated and is available for you to use on the Marquette Challenge website. It has some ideas for fundraisers, for those who are just getting started, and some additional resources to make your event successful. Donations can also be made to support the foundation on their Just Giving page. It's a crowdfunding platform that allows you to customize your own fundraising page for your event and invite friends to join you on social media. And lastly, the deadline for the 2021-2022 VCU-Marquette Challenge is May 16th, 2022. All donations must be received by the foundation by this date. Finally, I'm going to pass it back to Hannah with a few closing comments.
Thank you, Ashley. I just want to say one last thing. If you wish to make a contribution right now, you can text CHALLENGEPT to 414-44 and mark the school in the appropriate field. This will put your school on the list already for the 2021-2022 VCU-Marquette Challenge. Again, just text your donation to CHALLENGEPT to 414-44. I want to thank everyone so much for joining us tonight. Please feel free to reach out to us with any questions. We are here to support you. If you want to set up separate meetings to discuss more about your fundraising plans, we are happy to do that, and you can just shoot us an email and we'll kind of get that underway. Thank you again, and we really appreciate your time and interest in the VCU-Marquette Challenge.